Have you ever gone to a new school? Had that pit in your stomach? Walking into a new school can be alienating. Having everybody looking at you is terrifying. As you walk past your new peers, you hear harsh whispers. Then suddenly something hits you from behind. You turn around to face a sea of angry people holding stones and spoiled food. The profanities coming out of their mouths are worse than the stones hitting your chest and face. Your cheeks turn red hot with anger and shame. The teachers do nothing, some even join in the crowd. You can't imagine how things could get any worse until you see army trucks pulling up in the distance. This might sound like a bad dream you can just wake up from, but for Elizabeth Eckford, this was far too real. I'm Kaylee Evans.
And I'm Felice Mullinax. You're listening to WJHS 91.5 The Eagle. Welcome to the Media in the Making podcast, where we look at the evolution of media from 1600 all the way to present day 2022. In this podcast series, we ask, how have different forms of media evolved and changed culture? Media in the Making, where media and culture are always changing. Now, let's continue our step back in time.
For many people, school was something they take for granted. But for the Little Rock Nine, it wasn't that easy. When Elizabeth got to Central High School on September 4th, 1957, there was a large mob of protesters trying to keep her from entering the school.
Yeah, these high school students who challenged racial segregation in the public schools of Little Rock, Arkansas, became the center of the struggle to desegregate public schools in the United States.
Wow, that's really brave. Even though these students felt helpless, there was a large group of news reporters capturing the event. I found this quote by Benjamin Fine, who was a New York news reporter who spoke about the mob. He said, "It's one of those almost incredible things, to see normal people, many of them, most of them, churchgoers. And if you get them in their homes, they'd be the kindest, nicest people. But in a mob group, something happens when that group gets together."
I can't imagine seeing the people I go to church with in a mob.
There was so much brutality from just regular people.
I know, like imagine seeing your old Sunday school teacher chucking rocks at a teenager simply for going to school. So these news reporters really showed the world how bad Little Rock had gotten with desegregating public schools. It actually got pretty ugly for everybody. As the civil rights story got bigger and bloodier, black journalists, because of their race, became targets of the mob who did not respect them as human beings or as journalists. Even though the news could show many people the events happening, they didn't always report life as it truly was.
Right, because before Little Rock 9, African Americans were depicted differently on the daily news. Actually, they weren't shown at all. I mean, if you were to read the Arkansas Gazette in your household in the 1950s, your distinct impression of the African Americans would be that they weren't born, they didn't get married, they certainly weren't debutantes, they didn't have children, they didn't die, they didn't attend school because there were no written newspapers with notable exceptions.
Yeah, so this must have been why when 9 African American children were shown on every news station, people were glued to their TVs. Media played a large role in shaping the course of the Little Rock 9 crisis by drawing both national and international coverage to the event.
In some ways, though, the crisis shaped media.
What do you mean?
Well, before the 1950s, the on-spot news coverage wasn't a thing. When word spread, reporters flocked to the scene to report the events that happened before they died down. This was one of the first times that on-spot news coverage happened and set a precedent for future newscasting stories.
Oh, right. While photographers in Life magazine and other publications gripped the world, it was the new medium of television that came of age with the movement. TV proved its power as it conveyed graphic pictures of brutality into America's living rooms. Reporters and photographers from across the country traveled to Little Rock, expecting to chronicle the cultural poison unleashed in the South. Each time strides were made toward full desegregation, photos played a significant role in demonstrating the blacks' struggle for civil rights. I came across pictures by this photojournalist named Will Counts.
Oh, I don't think I've heard of him.
Well, he became really popular in 1957. Media from across the nation and around the world picked up Count's photos to show the hate so prevalent in 1957 against black people in the southern states. His photos, it turned out, as many people claimed, became the legal signatures that moved people from around this nation and around the world.
That's crazy. I've definitely seen how the many pictures advertised by the media display the horrific events that most Americans tried to ignore. And television became the central figure to which the public turned for news. Today, technology has enhanced the quality of images and speed at which news is broadcasted.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved so much, for good and for bad.
Right. The 1957 media coverage of the Central High Crisis began a new trend to provide the public with on-spot news coverage.
For sure. And did you know the photos had a direct effect on President Dwight D. Eisenhower's decision to send in federal troops to enforce the Supreme Court ruling?
Really?
Yeah, here it is.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. For a few minutes this evening, I should like to speak to you about the serious situation that has arisen in Little Rock. My words would better convey both the sadness I feel in the action I was compelled today to make and the firmness with which I intend to pursue this course. The President's responsibility is inescapable. In accordance with that responsibility, I have today issued an executive order directing the use of troops under federal authority to aid in the execution of federal law at Little Rock, Arkansas.
Eisenhower speaks of the deep sadness he feels on the subject. You can hear about terrible things going on in Little Rock and be sad, but it drives those feelings home when you can see the mob violently attacking 9 innocent kids, see the despair on their faces. It connects you to the moment happening miles away. The picture displayed on TV put you with that mob in Arkansas. Without media, intervention would not have been so swift.
That's a lot of power that mass media holds.
This is only the tip of the iceberg, believe it or not.
No kidding. Let's go back to Elizabeth Eckford from earlier. We can remember her first day of school, those toads hitting your face, the cool profanities, and the knot in your stomach. But in the distance, the faint sound of large trucks barrel towards you. The knot in your stomach gets tighter and your cheeks burn brighter. Little do you know, the trucks are actually here for your safety. All the harshness you've endured has been directly shown to the president through the power of mass media. And now the troops are here to save you rather than add to your pain.
Media in the Making is brought to you by WJHS 91.5 and the Eagle Tech Academy Mass Media classes. Media in the Making, teaching you about the evolution of media throughout history and its effects on culture. For more from the students, this podcast series is on the 91.5 website, WJHS915.org. Thank you for joining us.